Good afternoon, everyone. You've got Ashley Weeds here. I am joined by my new friend, Grace Rash. Grace, thank you for joining us today. And this topic could not be more perfect. Last night, I did a live talking about someone that had a lot of caffeine in their life, and I've had a lot of people, ask me the ways that caffeine can affect the body. And one of the things that comes up consistently is hormones. And so it was just perfect divine timing, Grace, where 2 3 weeks ago I found you on Instagram on a reel, guys, and I was like, who is this woman, this hormone coach? And she's talking about periods and she's giving this advice, and I'm like, this is someone that I need to talk with, whenever you just feel that connection. And so the topic today is caffeine does what to my hormones? Thank you again, Grace. I appreciate you joining us today.
Of course, yeah. Thank you so much for having me. And it really was one of those divine timing things. Ashley literally was like, "Hey, I know that you don't know who I am, but I would love to talk to you more." And we connected from there. So I'm so excited that we did, and I'm really excited to open this topic up because I know that so many people are curious about it. But yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so as you guys are jumping on here, put hashtag live for us. If you are going to be watching this in replay, put hashtag replay for me. And I want you guys to drop your questions. So this is going to be an amazing topic today. You guys stay tuned because you're going to want to hear this information. But if we don't get to all the questions, we'll make sure to circle back around and address what we can with you guys, okay? All right, so first things first. Grace, there is not enough time in the world for you to tell us how female hormones work. And I know that this is something that you do for a living to talk about, but if you could kind of give an overall nutshell of the female hormones and how it works, what would be some pointers there?
Yeah, you're definitely right. There's a lot to unpack, but the first thing that I would say is we are very undereducated about our body and our cycles and our hormones. And so the first piece to dive into is just the fact that there's so much more than you probably knew. I think most people think of your cycle, they immediately think of your period, or maybe ovulation is, somewhere in between. But as a whole, we're not really aware of the purpose of our cycle, and it's the fact that it's a month long thing that happens, and there's multiple different phases throughout. And that's something else that's not super familiarized, is the fact that we actually have 4 phases of our cycle. It's not just our period, it's not just ovulation. We have phases in between that matter and that hold value and change a lot week by week. So I would say, to explain probably the two biggest hormones that we look at when it comes to a woman who's struggling with cycle symptoms and trying to balance things out, is going to be estrogen and progesterone. For a lot of people, these are the two hormones that are out of whack in some way, shape, or form. So basically, estrogen and progesterone have a very delicate ratio that they like to be in. And if estrogen's a little high or progesterone's a little low, or vice versa, symptoms can arise and we can start feeling not our best. And so the biggest shift with a holistic perspective is looking at the root cause of what imbalance is there and how can we support that imbalance through different support systems and different aspects of our health that allow our body to restore that balance, rather than just looking at specific symptoms, which is what a lot of kind of modern medicine, quote unquote, does, is just, oh, you have mood swings, or oh, you have acne, oh, you have pain with your period. Here's this, and this for each symptom, where we're looking at what's causing it in the first place. But a good overview is the fact that, like I said, your cycle is so much more than just your period, and getting really curious with how you feel throughout the month and what those different phases look like for you is a really great place to start. So the overall theme for that would just be awareness, like bringing more awareness to your cycle and not just looking at it as what you've seen it as in the past, of just being a period that a lot of us, dread as we approach it. It's not something that we look forward to. So yeah, I see. Beth said holistic approaches, it's a game changer. It really is. It's vastly different than a non-holistic approach. So much more sustainable, and a lot of the time with a holistic approach comes learning so much about your body and about yourself that you probably didn't know. And that's the ultimate goal, guys, is to just know our bodies better and to feel more at home in our bodies and understand it and take charge of it. So hormone health as a whole, there's so many different things that I could get into, but it's just such an incredible thing to explore. I would definitely encourage you guys to do some more research or even just tune into yourself. Like I said, like tune in as you move through the different phases of your cycle every single month and take note of how you feel, any symptoms that come up, because it's your body trying to tell you something. Um, it's hard to figure out where the nutshell ends because there's so much that we could get into there.
Yeah, and I love the holistic approach. I know previous years when I would go to my doctor, it was always birth control was the answer or trying out different birth control. And being in my late 30s at this point, it's like I want to start addressing the source and not the symptoms anymore. So I love the holistic approach that you have to it. And I know that I've seen in your stories and some of your reels, you're not just addressing what the source is, you're also addressing the mindset around that. That is huge. In the way that we think about it and the way that we approach it and talk about it. So I know with that, Grace, that there's a ton of things that can affect it. So what would you say are some of the factors that affect our hormones?
Yeah, so there are a lot of different factors, both kind of internal and environmental. I would say, I think the statistic on average is like 80 to 90% of women experience some form of symptom or issue when it comes to their hormones. It's usually, PMS or cramps or acne. That's a huge number. And because it's so common, a lot of people view it as normal. And that's kind of that mindset piece you were talking about is a lot of the time the first step is just realizing that change is possible and realizing that you don't have to deal with those symptoms. It's not just part of having a cycle. It doesn't have to be that way. The reason that it's so prevalent is because there are so many different things that affect it that we're not aware of. And one of those things, I would say the biggest piece is probably stress. Stress affects our hormones in such a huge way. So getting a good handle on your stress, having active stress management is really crucial, not just having stress as it comes, tending to it that way of like, oh, I feel stressed, let me do something to diffuse that stress. But active stress management looks like including things in your day that are going to prevent that stress as well. Also, if there's dog noises in the background, two puppies in here with the
I'm
help.
going to tell you again, Grace, I hope your dogs join us. They're adorable. I'm just saying.
They're in here, and one is like trying to get comfortable on the floor and just making all kinds of noises. But stress is one of the biggest ones. Another big one is nutrition. I'm sure all of you know nutrition is so, so important in so many different ways. And there's not just a foundational element to nutrition that's so good for your hormones, but also having foods that support different phases of your cycle and seeing how you feel week by week is really important as well. And of course, everyone's body is different. So finding what works for you rather than looking at all of these dietary trends and, different things that you can try, like try not to look at labels and just figure out what works best for your body. It's such an important change to be made. Within nutrition, I would say the biggest things that are disruptive are going to be things like refined sugar, caffeine, of course, alcohol is a big one. Even things like gluten and dairy can affect you as well, um, depending on who you are. But refined sugar and caffeine are both pretty universal. And another factor is going to be how well you're sleeping. All of us can do a better job of that. On average, most Americans are getting like 7 hours, 6 hours of sleep now, and that number used to be like 8 to 9 hours not many years ago. But basically, as we're progressing, as technology is becoming more prevalent, all those blue lights and fun things that keep our brains extra stimulated, we're getting less and less sleep. So sleep is really, really important. We do a lot of repair while we're sleeping, so it's really important to your hormone health. Hydration is huge as well. Making sure that you're staying hydrated, making sure that you're staying hydrated with water, and that being a really big part of your life. Making sure that you have a water bottle on hand. And the final one would be moving your body. I would say moving your body in a way that makes sense for you, not overdoing it, not underdoing it, finding a really good rhythm with that. And even that mindset shift of looking at it as movement rather than exercise can be helpful for a lot of people that have had a not so great relationship with exercise in the past, trying different, trends and things like that, and maybe having that like all in and then all out, not finding a good rhythm. Just move your body as much as you can, in a way that feels good, and you're probably going to be good to go. So I would say those are a few good pillars of what could either disrupt our hormones or support our hormones, depending on which way you look at it. Just making sure that in all of those areas, everything is optimized is really key. And then environmentally, just looking at things that are endocrine disruptors. A lot of the products that we use and the things that we clean our house with and things we put on our skin and things we put into our body are very disruptive. And so the natural route is always better. Avoiding any kind of chemical endocrine disruptors is always key. But yeah, I would say those are a few good things to look at.
And it's interesting, Grace, because I did a live on my Facebook timeline last night of 5 reasons why you could hit a weight loss plateau. All of the things you just discussed are on that list. And so your health is all tied together with the hormones. And so we're starting to see a trend here of things to look out for, guys. So hopefully everybody is out there taking notes. I see you guys tagging people, so this is really good information. Keep tagging people, guys. So I wanted to go back to the caffeine part because it's huge. I think just about everybody I talk to has some sort of energy issue, and caffeine is usually the easiest form to try to consume to get your energy balanced or get it up, but it's not always the healthiest, and not all caffeine sources are created equal. I think that's important to note. So we're going to see differences between the different types of coffee and that are different types of caffeine, and that's going to be synthetic versus natural. And the different types have different effects on the gut versus the hormones, all around, right? As well as our energy and maybe some lulls and some crashes tied to it. So I will say that from talking with even Grace, but also gut health, listening and reading journals and things like that, medical journals, is that synthetic caffeine, and that is a lot in coffee, guys. The way that it is processed, the chemicals and things that are added to it does negatively impact the microbiome. And as Grace is talking about, healthier whole food type sources, natural sources are a healthier route to go if that is something you're looking to be a little bit more health minded. With that being said, can you talk a little bit more, Grace? And if I miss anything, feel free to let me know, of the natural caffeine and, how that really plays into the hormones.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the best kind of perspective shifts that you can have with caffeine, because like you said, I always like to take the physical approach and then also like what's going on up here with a lot of these things that we're talking about, is the way that we're looking at caffeine. I think that a lot of people, like you said, use caffeine for energy, when they feel like they're low energy and they need like a pick me up. That's what caffeine is used for. And it's really interesting when you look into what caffeine is actually doing. It's not that it's a source of energy and you're putting energy into your body, but caffeine is essentially kind of tricking your brain into thinking that you're not as tired as you actually are. And so then you have more room for energy. And that simple shift is really telling with how we look at caffeine, because I think we look at it as like literally we're drinking liquid energy, and it's really just that the way that the chemical structure is. There's a whole thing about adenosine receptors, which is kind of like how our body feels tired or awake, and the way that caffeine affects that is, like I said, just affecting the brain to think that you're less tired than you are. So that's a really important note, because when we are overloading ourselves with caffeine and we think that we're more energized than we actually are, in our physical bodies, we can tend to over push ourselves and do too much when we really should be resting, and we're not really getting to the root of why we're not feeling energized in the first place. Caffeine, I think, can be looked at as a supplement for energy. We can use that to support our energy levels, but it should never become dependent. I think a lot of people become very dependent and reliant on caffeine, and that's when we need to start looking at like you said, where it's being sourced from and how much you're consuming and why you're consuming it. There are definitely, especially in America, so many people that caffeine is a more ritualistic thing for them. Like they have their cup of coffee in the morning, and that's just something they've always done, and they genuinely enjoy it. Maybe it has nothing to do with the energy boost. It's just they like their coffee and they like to drink it in the morning, and it's a more ritualistic thing. And then there's also people who rely on caffeine to get through their day. So those are two very different things that I like to kind of do a thought exercise with people of why you're using it in the first place, because that can provide a lot of insight with whether or not your body is becoming dependent on a substance rather than just using it to support them. The way that caffeine affects your hormones is pretty multifaceted. The biggest thing is going to be your gut. We talk so much in the world of holistic health about the gut because it's such a powerhouse. It's literally like the second brain. A lot of people are starting to say now because of how many different chemicals are produced in the gut that affect our mood and affect our energy and affect so many different aspects of our health. So keeping your gut healthy is really, really important. And something that caffeine does is your body, your gut has to process that caffeine, your liver has to process that caffeine. And when we're overloading our bodies, we're leaving less room for it to process other things and kind of wearing our system down. And one of those things is going to be the way that our body detoxifies excess estrogen. So I talked about estrogen earlier. Higher levels of estrogen are one of the more common reasons for hormone imbalance and cycle symptoms. A lot of people suffer with high estrogen levels, and that leads to painful periods and hormonal acne, mood swings, irregular cycles, very heavy cycles, so many different symptoms that can be tied to higher estrogen levels. And so there's actually a specific part of your gut that is responsible for processing and detoxifying that excess estrogen. And it's a part of the microbiome called the estrobolome. And that estrobolome is specifically for detoxifying higher levels of estrogen out from the body. So when we're wearing our gut down with too much caffeine and processed foods and all these different things that can affect your gut, it's also affecting that specific part of the microbiome responsible for keeping your hormones levels balanced by getting rid of any excess levels. And so that's a really big reason why, and kind of like a biology lesson as well, of why it's so important to keep your gut healthy. And caffeine is just one of those things that it's really important to be mindful of. Number one, like you said, the source of your caffeine, making sure it's nothing extremely over processed and chemical ridden. You're getting it from a natural source if you're getting it at all. And then also just looking at how much you're consuming and whether it's something you're dependent on. My first suggestion is always just to experiment with ways to cut back and support your body in different ways. There's really great substitutes that support your energy levels in a different way. It's not necessarily caffeine, but it's just supporting your stress response system and your energy levels and helping you not get brain fog and fatigue. And it's just important to look at your resources and see how you can move some things around. But yeah, I'm curious to know if there's anything specifically that you want me to dive into in that, or if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, so it can be easy for the mind to say, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! I need to cut out my coffee. I love my coffee," and I think what Grace is trying to get at, guys, is easing back and being mindful. So, Grace, if you can talk a little bit more around that, because some people freak out whenever we're like, "I need to dump my morning coffee and switch over to green tea."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're so right. And to the point where I've literally worked with women, or not to the point of working with them, but I do a discovery call initially before we start working together. And I've had so many people on that call be like, okay, cool. I don't think I have any questions except for one. Are you going to make me stop drinking coffee, or are you stop making me drink energy drinks, or stop like all these different things? And I'm always like, oh, first of all, I'm not going to make you do anything, but I am going to educate you in a way that's going to allow you to make an informed decision for yourself. So number one, I'm not telling anyone to stop doing anything, but I do want you to make a very wise decision in support of your health and in support of your hormones. So there are different forms of caffeine. Typically, the way that we look at coffee, I know that you mentioned, Ashley, a lot of things are over processed and very chemicalized when it comes to the way that coffee is produced. And I would definitely agree with that. And I would also say that there's been so much research that has been done on how caffeine coming from coffee is very, very fast to release and very fast to have that, that dip or that decline afterwards. And there are so many other sources of caffeine that have a much lower release and so much more sustainable energy levels throughout the day, and also support your body with different antioxidants and things that are so good for your system. And then there are also different things that you can use to support your body that don't have any caffeine at all, and like I said, just support different systems with your stress response system and the way that you beat fatigue and beat brain fog without that caffeine boost. There's so many different sources, and I do recommend starting slow unless you're just one of those people that it feels better to go all in, and that's fine, do your thing. But cutting back, maybe let's say you drink 2 cups of coffee a day or 3 cups of coffee a day, morning, that little afternoon pick me up that a lot of people have, and then maybe something later on in the afternoon, or you have 2 cups in the morning and then one in the afternoon. Maybe start by replacing one of those with something like green tea. I know you mentioned green tea or some other form of caffeine that's also a lot, the content of the caffeine is a little bit lower as well. So you're kind of getting your body used to not quitting entirely, but just scaling back a little bit. So you're replacing the actual thing itself and you're cutting back on the caffeine levels. Start there, see how you feel. If it is more of a ritual kind of thing, like you like the taste of coffee and you like that warm beverage in the morning, there are some really great coffee alternatives, some different teas and things like that that taste very, very similar to coffee, but have so many great things like adaptogens and super, super amazing things for energy and stress levels without the caffeine itself. So I would just start with maybe replacing 1 cup a day or a couple, and literally just note how you feel. See how you feel, and keep in mind that if you're like quitting cold turkey, there will probably be some adjustment to be had, like a period where your body's going to respond because it probably did become dependent on that caffeine. But there's so much that has, I mean, especially with the women that I've worked with, so many symptoms that have changed or dropped off entirely from that simple switch of either cutting back on caffeine levels or just replacing coffee with something else. Especially, I'll make this note too, I don't know like the age range of people watching, but I've seen it even more so in women in their like premenopausal years or even menopausal years, and they're experiencing things like hot flashes. I don't know what it is. I there's yet to be enough research done on it, but caffeine, cutting back on caffeine or just getting it from a different source other than coffee will change the way that you experience hot flashes and most likely eliminate them altogether. It happens every single time that I work with someone who is experiencing hot flashes or night sweats. Refined sugar and caffeine are those two things that tend to kick it. There's a lot to explore there, and like I said, everyone's different, so the way that you approach that, do what feels really good for you. If it feels good to experiment with going all in and you're all about that, that's great. Or if you want to just cut back like 1 cup at a time and replace it with something, substitute it with something, that's another great route.
That's awesome, Grace. One more thing is, and I get asked this a lot, like, what's the most that I should have of caffeine in a day? And I know there's some general health recommendations, but Grace, what is it that you tell your customers when they ask you that question?
Yeah, so again, I think that everyone's body's different, so it's hard for me, from my perspective, to put a hard number on how much you should consume in a day. Of course, like the FDA and all of those fun things will recommend like 200 milligrams, I think, a day is um, the cap for, healthy caffeine levels. I will say too, a lot of research has not been done in the way that it affects men and women differently. Men tend to have much higher capacities for caffeine than women do. I do think that a lot of that comes from our cycle and how things change throughout the week depending on where we are in our cycle. Might have a higher tolerance one week and a lower tolerance the next week. But I would really just say experiment with what works for you. I don't like the idea of putting like a specific number on it. A lot of other people do, and I think that's great. But from my perspective, I'm so interested in what each and everyone's individual body is doing and what they thrive in. Um, I'm curious to know if you have any thoughts on that, because I know that you do a lot of discussion around caffeine as well. Is there a number that you found is really helpful for a lot of women?
I would say I would agree with you. The same, Grace. It's going to be different person by person, but I think the first thing is for everyone to do a self-assessment of how much they're taking in, because I feel like, and I've seen this with myself personally and with my friends and going to Starbucks, is you go based off of need. You go based off of how you're feeling, and so those 3, 4, 5 cups really add up, and not just in terms of the caffeine that you're putting in, but also the added sugar, the synthetic piece of it. So, being mindful and just taking that assessment first and trying to slowly, one by one, start to cut back or move to a healthier replacement little by little. Most find, and I think you're going to second this one, Grace, that when you start to make these healthy shifts and not just the caffeine, but in looking at your refined sugar, eating whole foods, sleeping a little bit more, cutting out the technology at night, setting those boundaries, hydration, all of that. When you start to bring all of that together, I would find that you're not going to need
Mm-hmm.
nearly as much caffeine. I do think personally that a little bit of green tea caffeine is really good to help with the focus and the mental clarity, but it's not as much as we think. It's really not. And I don't know if there's something that you want to add there or not, Grace. Is that all right in alignment, you would say?
Yeah, no, for sure. I would say that the self-assessment is a really good place to start. I'm glad you said that, because I do think that a lot of people probably would be surprised by how much caffeine they're consuming. And even what you said about like going to Starbucks, think about the fact too that it's like, oh, cool, what size do you want? And a lot of the time we're not thinking about how many milligrams of caffeine are in the smallest one versus the biggest one. It's just like, oh, I want a big one today. Like I'm feeling pretty tired. Or maybe you just like, whatever you're getting a frappuccino and you just want to go all in, but you're not thinking about how much you're consuming. So I would definitely say, number one, I agree with the self audit is really, really helpful. I would say in all of those, going back to the areas that can either disrupt your hormones or support your hormones, doing self audits in all of those areas is really helpful too. Just looking at how much sleep am I getting? What does my relationship with food, with exercise look like? What do my stress levels look like? All of those different, how much water am I drinking? Doing that and starting there, you're so right that once we start to optimize those different areas and feel really good, we won't have as much of a need for a pick me up. Like I said, the whole point that, if you're not just looking at it from a ritual perspective of like having that routine of that coffee in the morning, if it is more of an energy thing, that means that your energy levels are feeling depleted, and there's a reason that they are. And in my opinion, and this might hurt some people's feelings, drinking a cup of coffee is just putting a band-aid on the issue of low energy rather than actually figuring it out. And it is a lot easier to do that, but it is not worth it long term. It's definitely worth taking the time to really understand your body and support it accordingly. And then you won't have as much of a need, exactly like you said. And realizing that, like you said, a cup of green tea, number one, so many amazing antioxidants in green tea. And I just looked up the numbers so that I could be, very on top of being specific with things. But like 35 milligrams is the average in just a cup of of green tea versus 100 milligrams just about in a cup of coffee. So you're also, cutting that in, a third if you were to make a switch with something like that. And also green tea is just so good, guys. It's so nice.
Mhm.
You can do like a matcha latte as well if you're a latte person. And also those alternatives. If you are someone who genuinely likes the taste of coffee, Tea Chino is a good brand. It's Teecino. You just brew it like you would a cup of tea. It has some really great adaptogens and some herbs in there like dandelion root and which is really really good for estrogen levels. So you're getting like a double whammy there. And then Rasa Rasa. That's another good brand. And both of those are some kind of tea or herbal source or adaptogenic source that kind of mimics the taste of coffee. So if you're like really struggling with weaning off of coffee because you actually like it and enjoy it, and other than just relying on it for energy levels, I would definitely recommend looking into some alternatives in that way too. And then your taste will probably change as well the more that you start to experiment with other sources.
Yeah, and Joni mentioned cafe. So there is a supplement called Thrive Cafe, and it's a coffee substitute as well. You could add it into your morning shake. You can add it with hot water, cold water, and it's got all vitamins, minerals, plant extracts in there too. There's just a wide range of choices, and that's what Grace and I are all about: options and education and understanding what's available to you guys. Um, so one thing that I have found is switching out my vitamins also helped. And I was super surprised by that just a couple of years ago because I had a huge energy sleep issue. It was a really, really vicious cycle. And so switching out vitamins to my plant-based ones that also have the prebiotics digestive enzymes for the gut health portion. And it's got about between 55 and 75 milligrams of the green tea caffeine. So it supports all that Grace is saying. So just knowing that there are options, and if you guys have any questions or you want more information about any of that, definitely comment down below. I think we're going to wrap this up, Grace. We've goodness, I could talk with you all day long. But you can find Grace and I both on Instagram. You can look up Grace Rash there, Ashley Weeds there, of course, here on Facebook. But Grace, I want to say thank you so much again for your time today. I found this conversation very refreshing, and I appreciate you bringing all your knowledge to all of us today.
Of course. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. We could literally talk about this all day if we wanted to, but I think we hit some good points and gave people just a place to start. That's the most important thing, is just having a plan, having some direction of where to start with all of this.
Awesome. Okay. And don't forget to check out Grace's bio. I think it's on your Facebook page as well, which you'll see after whenever I tag her, but on Instagram as well, check out her link. And she's got some really good educational courses there. You can sign up and do a discovery call with her. And of course, check out her Instagram reels. So if you're looking for some inspiration, guys, Grace is going to bring it to you. But with that said, you guys have an amazing day. Thank you again, Grace. Take care, guys.
Thank you so much.
Bye.